Hi everyone, I'm Karen Smith. I work for the South Yorkshire ICB. Program manage the Green Social Prescribing program, and it's just really nice to meet more of you, and kind of put more faces to names and hear a bit more about the projects. So that's great. Thank you. Hello everyone, and I've already introduced myself, but I did just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing. It's really brilliant to hear about the different projects that you're delivering and what you're learning from that. And thank you for sharing data and stories with us as well. When we started out on this program, and still this is a test and learn program, so we've, it's been a real kind of process of learning and testing stuff out and experimenting a little bit, and really appreciate all of your contributions. And I think actually we've asked you to get involved in more besides, so you might have taken part in interviews or focus groups or different things. So thank you. Your time and your energy support to support the learning is very much appreciated. Sorry, I do have a slightly hoarse throat this morning, so apologies if I cough a little bit while I'm talking. What I wanted to do was just kind of reflect on a couple of things and then invite a bit of conversation really about the monitoring and evaluation. So one of the first things I just wanted to acknowledge, and because I don't know if this has been part of your conversations before or not, but the data that you've all been sharing with us and the case studies, we share that with NHS England every 3 months, and they share it with the national programme team. So you recall that this is a national programme, brings together lots of different departments, including DEFRA, Public Health, Sport England, lots and lots of different partners, Natural England, who recently came across to Sheffield to find out more about the programme. So all of that's been shared regularly, and we've been discussing the findings from that every 3 months. And what that's kind of showing us is that generally we're seeing a huge rise in the levels of people taking part and having access to green and blue social prescriptions. And we've seen some really great case studies or impact stories from some of you. So thank you very much for that. It's all gone somewhere. I just want to give you that assurance. And another place that it went was to our national evaluation team, which brings together various universities, including both of the Sheffield universities. And they've gone through all of the data and the case studies and have recently produced a national report looking at all of the 7 test and learn sites in England. And they've produced some kind of national perspectives about what's going on. That's still going through peer review, so it's not a kind of formally published report yet. But what they've also shared with us is a little bit of analysis at South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw level about what's going on in our system. And it was really heartening, because what we kind of saw from that early data was that actually, all of your projects are reaching people with mental health conditions with varying levels of need, that we are engaging with our target cohorts of Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, young people, people who've been clinically vulnerable to COVID, and people living in the top 20% deprived communities. So we know that at a South Yorkshire Bassetlaw level, that's been working really well. We've done a little bit more analysis at a place level to kind of understand what does that look like when you drill down a bit. And then we've seen a little bit more variation, and that review has fed into some of the place workshops that Kieran and Jess are going to talk about in a bit. So I won't go on to that, but it's been really interesting, and we've been able to kind of learn from the process so far and think, how do we kind of refocus, reset a little bit and engage different people. Oh, there's just been a message from Jess.
I just had to dip out, but we shall continue for her.
Yeah, okay. So that's all of the learning so far, and we've still got 1 more quarter of data that we're wanting to capture. So when we set out on the grants, we asked everyone, you can keep delivering up until December. Not every project is designed that way. I know that some have probably already come to an end. Some will be coming to an end in the coming weeks. But we are seeking that data from October, November and December. And so again, the ask is that you share with us a final spreadsheet with either the aggregate anonymised data or the individual anonymised data. And if you haven't already, if you could please share a case study with us. Every project is asked to share at least one case study. When we set out on this, we said if you've had relatively quite a lot of money, because projects ranged anything from less than £1,000 up to £30,000, then really, if you're at that kind of higher end of the spectrum, would really like to hear a few different impact stories. And the Community Foundation will be contacting you all to get those reports in. And I think they will be asking you to perhaps do a final report. We've just got to kind of clarify what that means, really. Initially, when we embarked on this, we thought the university might do a telephone interview. I think we're just trying to work out what's best there. So that's kind of where we are. So I suppose I wanted to just kind of ask you all if there was anything that's kind of still unclear about the monitoring ask. It's just a bit of a space to kind of ask those questions, and I'll answer what I can. If I can't answer anything today about how to complete the monitoring or how to get that into us, then I can certainly come back to you straight after the meeting. But also it's test and learn, and we're just really keen to understand what you think's been helpful about the process, what's been less helpful, how could it work better, really. Particularly if we are going to have some additional grant monies to invest in the programme. Shall I just quickly say a little bit about that to just put it into context, Kieran? I know it's a little bit later on in the agenda, but I think it's helpful just contextualise.
Now then, please,
yeah.
Go.
Yeah, so in terms of grant extension monies, we've got a bit of money to invest in some projects to continue for a little bit of time. I kind of got to stress the little bit throughout all of that. So we've got £115,000 to invest across 5 places. You can appreciate that's not a huge pot of money in each place, but what we're trying to do is see how we can invest that well to support as many projects as we can, in however that might be helpful to you. And that's where the place workshops come in that we'll talk about later on in the agenda. But also we're having conversations about whether or not we can support a year 3 for the programme. We always knew that running a test and learn programme of this scale was going to be a huge challenge in 2 years, and then we've thrown into that a few major crises such as COVID and cost of living and actually system change from an ICS perspective. So there's been an awful lot going on for everyone, I think, over the past 2 years. And we do feel that a year 3 would be really helpful in terms of having a bit more time to keep delivering, keep learning, and then think about, so how do we build and scale this, right across South Yorkshire going forwards. So we're having conversations within the ICB about whether or not we can identify funding, really. I think colleagues are all very supportive of what this programme's about and the impact that it's having and the change that we're starting to see for the people that are accessing green prescribing. But we're having conversations about where that funding might be. Alongside of that, the national programme team are also advocating very strongly for a year 3, and they've submitted a business case to Treasury to see if we can access that funding nationally. And if that's successful, then all 7 test and learn sites would be able to access further funding to keep things running. Unfortunately, the timing's not great. We're not going to know the outcome of the business case until we think around Christmas. So I appreciate that that's not ideal for any of us, really. But I think it's really positive that the national programme team are doing this. And it certainly enables the ICB to think a little bit more strategically about how we can invest as well. So I just wanted to share that context because I think it just sets the scene a little bit. So coming back to monitoring and data, really keen to learn how this can work as well as possible for all of you. So if there's any kind of things that you think we need to take on board, if we're able to continue doing this, then it would be great to hear some of that today. So I hope that's clear. There's kind of 2 things from me then is, do you have any questions or comments or, things that would just be helpful to clarify for the final quarter? And going forwards, how do you think it can work in the best way possible? Is that okay? seeing some nodding, so I hope that was okay. Sheila.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to represent how beneficial this funding's been for the wider organisation, I think, in a way. And there's none of that in the monitoring, because I think having we had a year's worth of funding to run one of our allotment groups, which has been very successful. We run 2, and the other ones has to be funded by, you know, trusts and fundraising. And I think it's been really useful to be able to put on my applications, we have dedicated funding for a year from, you know, and also, I mean, I've also been putting in there that I'm hoping this will show the benefits of green prescribing, and there might be some ongoing funding. But I think that as an organisation, we're very small. We've got bigger over the year because we've had this dedicated funding for this year. We've managed to do other things with our other money, and it's been really helpful as a sort of overall organisational development tool, not just for the group that it's providing funding for. And it'd be nice to be able to tell you about that, actually, if we get a chance to do that.
Thank you. That's a really interesting point. Do you have any thoughts about how you'd like to tell us?
Well, I suppose what I'm thinking about is what I put in my other funding bids, basically. And I think, you know, to put that we've got this dedicated funding, it shows that quite a large body has got faith in us. That is some sort of statutory interest in green prescribing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to ask a vague question. I can fill it in, really. Yeah. It just feels like it's all reporting on is the bit that you fund, which is great. Yeah. But it's the knock-on effects, I think, have been bigger. So yeah, I'd have to think about what you might want to ask me, so I could let you know.
It's really interesting, actually, because NHS England kind of want to know about the stuff that we're not funding that's happening in green and blue prescribing. And we felt it, quite honestly, it would be a little bit cheeky to ask you all to report on stuff that we're not funding. So we kind of took a view that we'll ask about the bits that we're paying for. But yeah, we haven't asked for that broader bit. I think there's probably a couple of options. One is that we could just kind of ask a question alongside the final quarter's monitoring, or when we have that conversation about is there a final monitoring report and what does that look like, then I think there's an opportunity there as well. But we'll take that back and discuss it. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe a question like, are there any benefits to the wider organisation that you would like to tell you about, tell us about, rather than it being a compulsory question? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody else?
There's a hand from Joy.
Hi, Karen. A couple of things I just wrote down as you were talking. I think one thing I noticed the last time I completed the monitoring was that the definitions of some of the categories, I was finding it quite hard to think, because I know the clients putting them in those categories. So for example, the mental health needs, it's something like no mental health needs, mild and moderate, and maybe having some kind of glossary with definitions of what that means, because that can mean different things to different people.
Okay.
So that was one thing I kind of picked up. I think the other thing is wellbeing scales. So we found that a little bit tricky. I think that the wellbeing form we used wasn't that accessible for when we actually used it. A lot of our clients were struggling with it, so we kind of ended up scrapping it, to be honest. But maybe if anyone's had success with that and wants to share good practice, if they've got a wellbeing form that works really well, or they're collecting it a different way, I'd be really interested to hear.
Can I just check with you which wellbeing form you're referring to? Because I don't think we issued one as a programme. What scale are you using?
We used, well, it's based on Edinburgh Warwick, but we kind of adapted it a little bit. But we found it wasn't really that accessible for people. For example, we had a guy with dementia, and he just wasn't understanding what we're trying to ask him. But I think for the majority of people, that wasn't really a very easy way to find out about their well-being. I think we should have used something a lot simpler.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't know, Owen and Kieran and Sarah, whether or not there's been some kind of sharing of what different measures people are using. Is that's something that could be looked at?
Yeah. No,
Kind of learn from each of the different approaches.
is that because I thought, yeah, we kind of had the ONS4 sent out and the Nature Connectedness Index kind of attached to the stuff that we're doing as part of this project. I know that like Warwick, Edinburgh scales, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's really useful out there as well. Is it worth, and we've got time to kind of talk now about the different measures people are using, if that would be a helpful discussion to have here. Is that, I know it, are other people using the ONS4 and Nature Connectedness Index that are on the call today, or are you guys, you're using like the Warwick Edinburgh scale as well, or other things?
Because my understanding is the ONS4 is probably the most accessible, but I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear from people. But the Warwick Edinburgh is probably a little bit more. There's certain audiences who would view it as kind of a really credible scale.
Yeah.
Amy? Sorry, Kieran.
No worries.
Yeah, we've used the ONS4 and the Nature Connectedness one. Can't say the word. And we found it quite challenging. So the ONS4, I think it kind of, it puts more of like a clinical feeling to the sessions, because you're asking like quite set questions. So we adapted the questions so that we could just casually ask, rather than be like, can you fill this form in at the start? Because people, I think, felt like it was like a counselling session. And because that's what they have when they go to NHS counselling sessions, they have to do the same form. So people knew what that form were, and that kind of put them on edge. And then the Nature Connectiveness one, we've struggled on our side to understand how to like do the scoring of it. So we think we've done it, but we're not 100% sure. We've just kind of tried as best to do it.
Thank you.
You.
Karen?
We just simply created a very basic one. I wasn't able to access the online ones, either of them, either the ONS or the Nature Connect. So I just simply created a very basic one. I just took snippets from a mind project that I ran a few years ago, and I found that people were more receptive to answering those. It got all the information that we needed to complete the online, the electronic monitoring form, but as everybody's saying, people are quite defensive at the minute for a number of reasons. So as I say, we just kept ours as basic as possible to try and capture the information that you required.
Thank you. I mean, I will say in the data returns that we've had, the outcome measures is the bit that's, we've had the least data really. So I think probably different organisations have found this a little bit tough. I do wonder if we, when we do the extension grants programme, and if we get a year 3, I do wonder if this is something that we revisit and put, quite a bit of focus on, and just think about what are the best ways to support organisations to kind of demonstrate the impact. Do you think that would be a helpful thing to do?
I do personally. I mean, I'm not sure if I missed any training right at the beginning, but I really struggled to understand the scores, the scoring method of the online form. So that's why we just reverted to questions rather than numbers and things, because I just couldn't understand the form.
Well, we didn't actually do any formal training. So right at the beginning, we did a webinar that just kind of said, this is the overview of what we're going to be asking for around monitoring and evaluation. And then there was kind of an offer of one-to-one help and support through the Wildlife Trust and the evaluation team and partners. But yeah, perhaps actually maybe it's a discussion and perhaps thinking about a training offer around that, because it does feel quite important to find a way that kind of works for every audience of communicating the impact. So yeah, thank you for that. That's led us to a really interesting conversation.
It is all, I was just going to chime in as well and say it's really fascinating. I think the importance of kind of choosing the right kind of evaluations is a really important aspect, and was something that was, you know, discussed loads and the kind of setup of this program. And yeah, I really appreciate what you guys are saying about sometimes it just feel kind of strange asking such kind of clinical questions and when you do like different settings. And I think you've all been doing a really good job of kind of, you know, adapting it and making it work as well as you can. But I was going to chime in and say that, you know, I spent like 4 years in NHS research teams, and doing lots of kind of going and talking to people, sometimes with questionnaires that felt very out of date and very not relevant. But then if you kind of explained, you know, to the person talking to, you know, this is to help with gathering the information for showing the effects of this program you're doing, and people get on board. And it's been really nice kind of, yeah, getting some good feedback. And yeah, I'd like to say as well, if anyone does kind of need, you know, kind of assistance with the monitoring evaluation, if it hasn't been clear already, you know, me and Jess can kind of come out and do that kind of one-to-one support as well. But yeah, no, thank you guys for kind of just bringing some of that to our attention. That's really good to know.
Yeah, and coming back to the point about a glossary, we can think about that as well. There might be some other bits of the form that need a little bit more explanation, so that we get kind of consistent data as well. So thank you. Does anyone else have any sort of specific questions or comments about the spreadsheet? Amy, is that what you wanted to respond to? Your hand sort of went up at the same time as I said that.
Yeah, I don't know specifically about the spreadsheet. It's a concern that I have. So we're really panicking from our organisation, because we've very much done, I think we maybe took it too literally, the green prescription thing and like the mental health. And so we had a real bad start with referrals and not getting referrals through and things. And then we only started getting them properly in autumn, at the start of autumn. But our programme has been very, very individualised, and it's one-to-one sessions, and it's really about mental health. And we've been working with people that have got severe mental health issues, been hospitalised, just come out of hospital, all that kind of stuff. So we haven't, and they have like hour sessions, one-to-one hour-long sessions with staff. So our service has very much been lower, much lower, I think, than other services have, in terms of the numbers of people that we've seen. But we've seen some massive progression already with people, like they're accessing other services, reductions in medications, going on to training, going on to volunteering in such a short amount of time. But the numbers aren't there, and we're really, really panicking, because now we're getting more and more referrals through, to the point where we've not got enough staff to do all the referrals, because there's not very many of us. And we're thinking, oh, well, everyone else has done these group sessions. And we have put in for some funding for a group session for progression for people, because they want to stay, but, you know, they're ready to move on from one-to-one. But I'm just kind of panicking, because other people have they might have hundreds of people that they've seen, they've done lots of groups, whereas we really haven't, because we've been so laser focused, and we really did take it. I think we just took it too literally, maybe. We really wanted to help people have massive changes to that person's mental health, and that's obviously takes a lot more time. So I'm panicking.
Well, we'll stop panicking now. When we set out on the grants investment, we funded 39 different projects, and a huge variety of projects, approaches, you know, all sorts of stuff. And really what we've been trying to do is understand what works, to really support people's mental health and to sustain engagement and to reach people that aren't necessarily already accessing this stuff. So that's what we're interested in. It's that learning about what works. And actually you've prompted a memory now, because but part of our process in having kind of local place review about where do we go next with the grant extension, we've been having a chat with the social prescribing teams and others who've been involved in all of this. And I actually think your project came up, Amy, because we were kind of looking at it going, oh, the numbers do look a bit low. But then we had a big discussion about actually what goes around all of that. And the social prescribing team were really advocating some of the success that you've been having. And that's what's helpful. But that's also where we need the case studies and the impact stories to understand the difference, because you kind of look at, I look at the spreadsheets every quarter and it tells you a little bit, but it doesn't tell you the story.
Yeah, so we're currently writing up quite a few. So we've got like snapshot case studies that we've been writing up, and then like more in detail case studies about people. With like the family's input and like their progression routes and all those kind of things. So is that kind of considered just as much as the spreadsheet numbers then when we hand it in? Yeah. So it shows
it all. Yeah, we're trying to look at the whole picture. So, you know, in talking to the social prescribing teams, we're sort of saying, so how does this feel from your perspective? Are the groups offering things that people want to access, that they're finding it helpful to access? So we're getting some of that perspective. We're looking at the case studies. We're looking at the numbers. We're trying to kind of think about value for money. We're trying to think about lots of different things, really. And yeah, so it's the whole picture. So if you've got stuff to share that kind of really describes, you know, on a more individual level, how what you do creates that change, then that's fantastic, and we'll read it. And we might share it with the national team. We've been sharing some really, the last case study that was shared was Bloom Sheffield, who did a fantastic case study, and we shared that with the national team and with Natural England and with the regional NHS England team as well, because it was just a really great illustration of the impact.
Is in terms of funding and things as well. So for our funding, we very much put in funding to set the project up. So a lot of our funding went towards setting up areas and making things accessible and equipment and everything. And so we, you know, we've kind of got that sorted because of that funding. And so future funding is just about wages, because we've got everything that we needed with this funding. So is that something that you'd want us to talk about how it's been able to help us to actually, you know, we've set up and we've spent all this money on setting up this project, and now, you know, we're quite self-sufficient on that side of things, and we've funded stuff ourselves as well to expand and deal with wet weather and things. So literally the only thing we're needing now for continuation of the project is the delivery costs of staff. Would that be useful?
It's useful to understand. I suppose what I'd just like to caveat a little bit is when I talked about our grant extension monies, it's really not a lot of money when you think about how many projects there are in each place. So what we're trying to do this time is be a bit more flexible in kind of what the money can be spent on, but we're not looking to make big grant, we're not looking to do kind of high value grants this time around. So it's kind of where can a little bit of investment help? That's kind of what we're looking at. And I suppose what we've tried to say right the way through this programme is, you know, that the ICB and the national programme team are probably not your long-term funder. We want to help. So it's kind of understanding what helps you create some sustainability for projects and services. Want to kind of see if we can help you to access other funds as well. We're trying to make the case that we need to keep doing something, but I'm not sure that we're kind of the long-term funder for all the projects. We're trying to explore all different options and see what kind of helps sustainability in the longer term, and we haven't got the answers yet. Sorry, I'm just trying to be really honest about that as well.
Yeah. No, that's good, because that's what we need from our side to be able to plan and try to adjust, isn't it? So that's good.
Yeah. But I hope that's just reassured you a little bit, that we're trying to look at the whole picture with this. So if you think the numbers aren't telling the story, please tell us the story in the case studies.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Mindful of the agenda, Kieran, so sorry if we're overrunning a little bit.
Not at all. I think this is really useful discussion, and we had quite a lot of flex in the agenda today for kind of conversations that might need to happen. Yeah, I think I saw a hand or two go up, but I think they may have gone down since, so maybe those questions were answered through the discussion that was had. Oh,
yeah, my hand shot up, but I think it was Karen's pretty much answered it. I think that story often is really important behind the scene, and you know, having that voluntary question at the end just so people get the chance to explain their story, I think can make quite a big difference. Because sometimes, like we've seen the numbers, or they don't quite rack up. Some organisations need that bit longer or that bit more time, or they've got a completely different structure, and so just having that chance to explain to the grant panel, what have you, what it is from their side that they're doing extra, whatever, I think can be really, really useful. In case, you know, what I wouldn't want to see is that, you know, for some organisations we kind of know their backstory, and then there's others we don't, and they don't get that chance. So it sounds like, you know, that kind of extra question, just as an open question, sounds really helpful, so that we don't suddenly go, oh, we didn't quite get their backstory.
Yeah. Well, any final comments or questions or suggestions for how we can do this better in the longer term? Otherwise, I'll hand back to Kieran. But thank you, everyone. That's been really helpful to me, and I hope you as well. And I'll be in discussion with Owen, Kieran, Jess, Sarah about how we take some of this forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Karen. And thanks everyone for your contributions. For this next section, I just thought it'd be really useful to just have a little bit of a reflection on the local place-based meetings we've had recently. Now, I'm conscious that we haven't had the one for Bassetlaw yet, and the one for Barnsley only happened yesterday. And I think we are also aware that we're quite low on numbers in terms of who we've got like here on the call. We're recording today's meeting, and it will, I think, be disseminated sooner rather than later, so it can be useful for this kind of the grant stuff coming up. But I was originally thinking, well, maybe there might be some people here from Sheffield who weren't able to make it to the Sheffield meeting, so we might want to go into like a smaller Sheffield room. But I think with who we've got, maybe we could just do we could just kind of share some of our knowledge from those of us who were at the local area meetings, and if anyone who wasn't there kind of gets a chance to, might have anything to feed into, that would be great too. So sorry, just to explain for anyone that isn't aware, we recently invited everyone who kind of received funding from us in the first initial stage to come to a local in-person meeting in each of the areas, just because we wanted to have that chance to kind of meet up face to face, but just be able to generate some discussion around reflecting back on the original priorities that we set, how they've been met, and any kind of new adaptations we need to make. So I think in all the areas we mainly talked about the original priorities, but we also brought in a little bit of kind of a little bit of modernizing and how we can do it now. Does anyone have any? I was about to say, does anyone have any questions before I kind of talk about some of the findings from the workshops? Over to you, Karen.
Hi, just I'm a little bit confused. I noticed on the South Yorkshire Community Fund website that the applications were now open to submit a bid for future Green Blue Social Prescribing, and the closing date was today, the 29th. So I submitted that, got that done and submitted an application last week. And then yesterday I received an email from South Yorkshire Community Fund saying that the applications are now open and the closing date is the 6th of December. So I'm just a little bit confused.
Can I come in there? Thank you for sharing that. There has been a little bit of personnel change at the foundation, and we've been trying to just work out the approach over the coming weeks. So sincere apologies for any confusion. I'll pick that up with the foundation and just clarify what's happening. Is that okay?
My concern is that when I access the application form through South Yorkshire Community Fund and the original information that was put on there with the criteria, so I followed that criteria, and then when I got an email yesterday, some of the criteria seems to change. So I did email back and say, can you please look at my application, and if I need to change anything or put anything else in, can you let me know as soon as, because obviously now in my head I'm thinking the deadline's the 6th of December, not today. So I don't want to miss out on anything because of a confusion in information.
Yeah. Do you mind just sharing what was it that changed? Was it the Rotherham priorities that changed?
It was just some of the criteria in the fact that when we had our meetings, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Owen, we were sort of focusing on young people, we were focusing on the BAME community, we talked about engaging more with the community connectors, and then the email that I received yesterday from Michelle from South Yorkshire Community Fund, it was more about sustainability and things like that. So
yeah, okay. Sorry, sorry, we'll unpick what's happened and we'll get some communication out. Just for everybody else's benefit, we started in Rotherham. So Rotherham was the first workshop that we did. And so this application process is just Rotherham. So I don't believe this will have happened anywhere for any other places yet. So again, yeah, real apologies for the confusion. We'll sort it out and you won't miss out. Is that okay? Sorry, that's as much as I can say about it at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Karen, as well. It's really useful to hear what's going on from your guys' perspective. Thanks for sharing. I'm very happy to kind of give a quick overview of some of the stuff that we discussed in Doncaster and Sheffield, some of the problems and maybe some of the solutions that we've kind of talked about so far. But before I do, is there anyone kind of from the ground who was at the meetings that would like to talk? Or no, I'm easy.
Am I all right to just mention something, Kieran? You know, we discussed how other organisations and other projects, like being aware of locality and assets in the community and things. I did have a meeting with Ben Russell, who's on our council, who's in charge of all the Future Parks projects.
Yes.
And he's really interested in the green prescribing and how we can be using future park areas in Doncaster to connect the green prescribing and enable that to happen in them spaces. We're partnering on a project with them. He's asked if we'd partner on a project for the Pit Top, which is a green space that borders onto our land, and really they're just about to put some funding in there and really try to boost that area. So we're hoping if we manage to keep the green prescription stuff going, that we'll be able to promote it and promote other organisations using that area, and the community using that area for green prescribing. But then they'd also have access.
Oh, sorry, I think you muted yourself at the end. As far as they'd also have access, I believe.
Oh yeah, so they'd also have access to like our space for, you know, things like toilets and doing like community inquiries and group inquiries, and helping to kind of make the use of that area and people aware of that area a little bit more. So I thought that was quite an interesting thing, because he was really really interested in the green prescribing and how like public places can get involved. So that was good. That's
fantastic. And yeah, no, I remember you saying you were going to meet with Ben, and thank you so much for kind of taking that forward a bit as well. We've kind of crossed paths before at the Doncaster Green Spaces Network meetings.
Yeah, he said he remembered you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, so just to kind of say for those who maybe don't operate around Doncaster, but it's something we've been talking about with Get Doncaster Moving and how things are kind of organised around there. Oh, nice to see you. Bye. But yeah, we've been looking into whether the things in Doncaster could be organised through using the kind of parts groups as a source of knowledge and spreading that as well. But just to kind of go on to more generally some of the stuff we discussed that came up in the kind of Doncaster meetings, was stuff like there was a realization that there are some assets that are had, such as minibuses and shuttles, that could potentially help with things like transport and travel and getting people to groups. And it was really nice to kind of see those discussions happening and information being kind of shared about, you know, oh, well, these people have a minibus, these people have a driver, maybe we can work together, and the kind of collaboration that it kind of talks about, or that it sounded like was happening naturally in Doncaster. And yeah, and we had the social prescribing leads, and about four link workers came to the meeting to kind of find out a bit more about green social prescribing too. So yeah, that was Doncaster. I can mention briefly, if anyone from Doncaster wants to kind of chime with anything else, please do. I definitely haven't captured everything there. In Sheffield, we had similar kind of discussions, but I think there was more focus on whether there could be a centralized kind of clothing bank rather than transport was the main kind of thing people were interested in Sheffield. And Lewis from Voluntary Action Sheffield was keen to almost take on kind of coordinating that, so that we could get some kind of winter clothes and things to help it be more accessible for people to go to activities. But yeah, we also, oh sorry, I'll hand over to you, Karen, before I.
Oh, so sorry, it was just a query really. I think about a month or two ago, we shared some details of a charity that does that sort of thing, and I thought it operated. Does it operate in Sheffield already, or?
There are some, yeah, clothes bank options, but I think it was trying to see the demand for that kind of thing is quite high, and there's a few different ones, because I was telling Lewis, you know, I go to the local climbing wall in Sheffield, and there's a climbing specific, you know, clothes donation box there, but it's kind of, yeah, Lewis is looking into whether he could be more of a central focus point for all of these clothes bank charities, so that we could borrow enough to let people do green social prescribing activities during the winter.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, obviously I'm just kind of, you know, talking a little bit about these meetings, and I haven't sent these notes on to Karen yet, but these will be kind of over this, by the end of this week, we'll have the kind of notes written up from the meetings. And then I believe, I don't know if we have an idea of actual dates yet? Like, because I know it sounds like Rotherham has kind of already started, but the other areas, I think it's all happening in December, so it will be soon. So we'll get those notes out by the end of this kind of week for any kind of information from the local area meetings that will be useful for kind of talking about what the priorities should be for the extensions. And it sounds like that's some of what's kind of gone on already, is like in Rotherham, there was the meeting, and then kind of from that meeting, the new kind of priorities were drawn out. So my apologies if that's a slightly kind of confusing overview, but I was just wanted to talk briefly about some of the stuff that happened in Doncaster and Sheffield. I feel like you guys on the call, most of you were probably there at the meetings, but if anyone has any questions or queries or anything that was really important from those meetings to kind of bring forward, do feel free to. Sarah, was that?
Yes, I was just coming in with, I think where we got to with Sheffield is it sounded like we had a bit of a potential solution around a clothing bank by involving Lewis. I think with Doncaster and some other areas, they were quite keen on a clothing bank, but they, you know, aren't quite as far on as having someone who go, oh, I could solve that problem. So, you know, we did have some quite interesting conversation in the Sheffield area that led to sort of having, if you could bring small organisations don't necessarily know how to talk to big private businesses, and you know, and in Sheffield it looks like there's an interface there whereby there are people already on, you know, around who are actually able to do that, and it was just that sort of thing about thinking a little bit bigger. Doncaster are very keen on a clothing bank. I think the whole clothing bank idea does seem really quite popular out there, and it's just having that mechanism to do it. So obviously lots of small organisations who are very, very busy and operating with, you know, not a lot of funds, knocking on doors of you know, outdoor places is not very effective, but actually potentially working together, you know, whether it be private business or whatever, it just seemed like there was some really good stuff come out of it. And just to be sort of what the one in Sheffield that was doing with Sharewear Clothing, so what they've said now is they're serving Sheffield based on organisations via a bulk order delivery service with a minimum order of clothing of for 20 service users to make the delivery cost effective. But it definitely felt like, you know, and there was Outkit mentioned, but it just seemed really clear that if everyone starts knocking at the same door, it's going to soon be a problem. So yeah, I just thought it was, you know, just really interesting, because obviously places like food banks and clothing banks could be really good places to talk about green social prescribing and get people involved potentially. So yeah, I just thought the conversations that came out of Sheffield and Doncaster were really, really interesting.
No, thanks for that, Sarah. Yeah, and personally, I've really enjoyed the getting to connect with people face to face as well. It's been a really rewarding experience, and yeah, getting to see, you know, some of the stuff that even may not be entirely as relevant to this project, but some of the connections that get made in the room just from kind of organizations all working towards similar kind of aims. It's been really great.